are the people who are living lives of devotion and prayer having an impact on the earth. So the question is that people in this sort of tough time we are going through at the moment with war in Europe and after COVID, and lots of people having their quality of their life compromised for economic reasons, and there's real hardship now going on, and in other countries there's real starvation, and of course there's a horrible war going on in Ukraine, and there's the general level of anxiety has been raised, and of course this has an effect on the astral plane. And that can be felt on the astral plane very, very intensively. So the people on the astral plane, especially the near Earth levels, they're just as much affected of what is going on the physical Earth as we are here. And because they're living very closely related to our Earth level of vibration and anxiety. And it's not a very pretty sight. I first noticed how people on the astral level are affected by our problems here was in 2003 during the Iraqi war when it started. And even before the war started, I had out-of-body experiences, and I noticed there were, the way it showed up on the astral plane, there were big thunder clouds on the horizon, and people were anxious. The astral inhabitants were anxious, and wherever I looked, there were thunder clouds, and there was this ominous feeling of impending storm or a hurricane or something. And sure enough, a few days later, the war started, which was widely as a shock and awe, and that is what it actually was on the astral plane. So people on the astral plane, when I was over there, I could feel it coming, and then it turned into a real sort of horrible thunderstorm and bad weather. So the people on the astral plane, especially on the low astral plane, who are on the same vibratory level with their fear and anxiety as we are, they are very badly affected by what we do here. On the higher astral level, it's slightly different because people are more easily focusing on more positive feelings, and they are the way they respond to our problems down here is via a sense of compassion and love, and that becomes even more so the higher people are evolved on different energy levels. So I like to now say something about this thing, how we can deal with it, and how we perhaps should deal with it, because people say, oh well, prayer is very important. We need to have prayer. We have to get together and pray for the for a better future. And I would say to that, prayer doesn't really do much if we still are in a state of fear. Fear is like a barrier, and it just takes our energy away from us. So if we want to have prayer, or if we want to meditate for peace or something, then we have to the first thing we have to overcome is our fear. We mustn't be fearful, because that immediately sets up barriers. And the way I go about it, and I spend a lot of time focusing on the worldly issues, but I do it from a perspective of being in a state of calm, of peace. And the only way I know how to achieve it is by turning home, by feeling home, by having this unity consciousness, by accepting where I really belong, and where I belong is home. And home is what so many people speak about who had an out-of-body experience. I always say I returned home to myself or to God. And that is actually the feeling when we feel completely as one with ourselves. And when we have the feeling of homecoming, there is no fear. Okay, there is just the comfort of love, of being sheltered, of being embraced by a much greater power, and the feeling of fear totally evaporates then, and we are at ease, we are at peace, and the feeling we get then is one of love, and that is the feeling where we are most powerful, where we can actually do an awful lot of sending energy into these areas, but we do it out of an experience of love, not just thinking about love or of hoping or making us laugh, than an experience of love. And the experience of love comes out of a feeling of being home where we belong. We're already at home, okay? We can just take faith in the fact that we're already at home. We can relax because that's our natural state. And when we do that, then the fear falls away. And then I would say, if we meditate on this basis and send our energy out, then we have got control over the situation on an individual basis to a very large extent, much more control than the people who are going around sort of in the battlefield and killing other people and doing horrible things. Okay, we have exponentially more influence than these people who are engrossed in the butchery and the mayhem of the lower energy levels. And this fact alone gives me great comfort that we can overcome all the hardships that we are faced with, including the climate change, the climate breakdown, these incredibly big problems which we are faced with. We can overcome them, we can address them, and there will always be ways which will come about and fall into place, which will help us, which will help the whole situation. So we can take comfort in the fact that this high energy is actually the dominant force in nature, no matter how bleak things look. I went with my friend in 2017 to Greece, where we went on a pilgrimage. We wanted to visit all the holy sites in Greece, Delphi and the Acropolis and things like that. And we ended up in a monastery on Mount Athos. And we spoke to these monks there, and it turned out that these monks, one of their main missions was to actually maintain peace on earth, and I spoke to some of these monks, and that was a very powerful thing, and it felt to me that they were there to maintain. They were Christian Orthodox monks, and we had some great conversations with them. One of the monks I spoke to, he was a Greek Orthodox monk, but before he became an Orthodox monk, he was a Buddhist, okay? And he then joined this monastery, and we spent days together, and he then introduced me into a chapel, which was a sacred chapel, which was only reserved for ordained monks. It was not allowed for visitors to go there. But he allowed me to go into the chapel, and I meditated in there, and I had a very profound spiritual experience with one of the Christian saints there. And I decided that is going to be a very big part of my next book. But what I'm saying is I don't see things as bleak as many people see it. I think we are going to get out of it, and we're going to adjust to what's happening, because what is actually necessary is that we accept the fact that we have ruined our planet, that we have succumbed to incredible selfishness, that we exploited everything for our own selfish gain, and that there's a price to pay. And recently, a very well-known professor, James Lovelock, he was the author of the Gaia principle. In his work, he defined that the planet Earth is basically an entity. It's not a dead piece of rock which circles around the sun, but is an organism where everything has to work in harmony in order to maintain it. And everything on this planet is playing a part in it. And if something goes wrong, there is a sort of self-adjustment mechanism which kicks in to restore some level of balance. And we are in this sort of self-adjustment process at the moment where things kick in and trying to create some form of order. And for example, the first thing that happened to us 3 years ago was the pandemic. And the pandemic was the first sign that there was a reaction in the planet to create some sort of awareness or a wake-up call for us to change our ways. And what happened, people became isolated. They had to reflect on their personal situations, their family situations. Everything changed in a very, very short space of time. And that was just a necessary thing which created a level of awareness. And now what's happening because of the war in Russia, we have our energy supplies have been curtailed. People now are forced to save energy because it's become very expensive. People are forced to curtail their consumer habits, and so on. And this is the self-adjustment process which James Lovelock has sort of indicated, that the planet has to work as a whole and has to, we all have to work together. And all these wake-up calls which we are going through, they are important for us in order to change our ways. And we do that automatically. We are part and parcel of a very big energy which is taking place, and we all individually take a part in it, whether we want it or not. So we may be forced to consume less, and as a result we burn less fossil fuel. We may have to turn the heating down, and all sorts of things start happening. In Germany, as a result of the gas being turned off, they now have to put a lot more effort into renewable energy. So we can see that everything that happens for a very good reason. There's a high price to pay, as we are at the moment. We're paying a very high price, especially people who are not so well off. They pay the highest price for it all. And the people who pay the highest price are the poor people in African countries or on the subcontinents. So that's what I like to say with regard to the state of the earth. And is a human-animal bond on the middle astral level as strong as it is on Earth? Well, I would say our bond with animals is incredible. And it's only when we go to the astral level that we can really appreciate how fantastic and how important our relationship to animals is, especially our pets. And anybody who's got a dog or a cat, they will understand there's a communicative link between us and the animals. And the link is incredibly strong and incredibly powerful. And of course the animals are very, very responsive to our feelings and ourselves and what's going on inside. Anybody who's got a pet who has been sort of separated from them for any time will know that. And of course that bond is maintained on the astral level, but it goes onto a much deeper state. I have come across animals on the astral level I can literally talk to in an intelligent way. Not talk to with language, but communicate via the mind. And animals are incredibly intelligent. Very often they are wiser than we are. They don't get sidetracked by nonsense and things which are non-essential to the survival and to the essential things. They are keenly keyed into the reality of it. And I found that I have even talked to birds on the astral level. You know, I've talked to birds who sat on the fence, and I had immediately a connection with them, and we communicated. And the idea of animal spirits, you know, which has become entered into our folklore, is also a reality, you know. So we have certain links, we can have certain spiritual links to certain animals, certain entities, and this has become incredibly clear to me over the recent years. And since I've had out-of-body experiences, for example, we have a cat, and people who have a pet, they know they can actually communicate with them. And I noticed that the verbal communication between our cat and ourselves has become more complex. The cat's language is more defined and more acutely geared to what the underlying understanding is, you know. And it's not just with regard to food. So we need to take animals into consideration in this world, because there is no separation between our species. Our animal species, we are just other animals. To them, we are just other animals. And there's no discrimination between the human species and the animal species. And the animals know that. They take us for perhaps slightly more stupid animals than we think we are, you know, because we are not so acutely attuned to reality as they are. And that, of course, throws a completely new light on the fact of how we deal with the animals we are cohabiting this planet with. And that is very, very important, because at the moment we cause incredible suffering on the animal population by the way we regard other animal species apart from ourselves as simply consumer products, you know. Lucid dream is a state where you become aware that you're dreaming, okay? And the dream scenario can be a very personal, private reality, which is fed by your subconscious input of your subconscious, and is usually related to your individual experience. And what you experience in a lucid dream doesn't have an external reality as such, but the borderline can be very, very fluid, you know, because we can actually manifest our dreams in such a way that they become visible to other people, okay? And we can, for example, I'll give you an example. I met a woman on the astral level who was incarcerated in a cell made out of concrete. And I entered the cell and she was there, and I said, "Why are you in this cage, you know, in the cell?" She said, "I can't find my way out of it." I said to her, "Do you notice that you created this cell because of the limitations you set yourself, you know?" And so I started talking to her, and then I went out, and by the time I came back, her concrete cell had disappeared because of a realization that she had created this cell for her, because of a set limitation. And a lucid dream is a bit like that. A lucid dream creates out of our inner subjective feelings a world, a subjective world, which we then act out in. And it can be a very positive world, but it's nevertheless subjective. You know, we can have fantasies, but the problem is that we cannot, if you're not experienced, we cannot discriminate between a subjective world and an objective world. And I noticed it, a friend of mine, his name is Robert Wagner, who I met in London a few years ago. We discussed, he wrote a book, a very good book, a Lucid Dream, Key to the Secret to the Higher Self, or something like that. I don't know the title exactly, but if anybody is interested in lucid dream, he should or she should go to Robert Wagner. He wrote a really interesting books about it. But he noticed that he felt he could do anything in his lucid dream, anything he wanted, until he started walking along a pavement and knocking hats off people's heads, you know, until somebody grabbed his arm and told him off. You know, then he realized for the first time that what he thought was just his dream is not necessarily like that, you know. So there's a boundary between these two things, and I've noticed that myself. We can actually project certain things on the astral plane, which then become real and can be seen by other people, and that is an interesting phenomena which takes a little bit of time getting used to, and in my next book, I'm going to investigate it into much more detail, because there are some scenarios where the two things sort of cross over, and where people influence the environment they are in to the detriment of other people. And it's a very, very complex, very interesting subject. And of course, people can use their collective imagination to create environments. They can even use a collective imagination to create environments which are completely real to the people on the astral plane. In my second book, Business of Infinity, I've described a situation where two people who were cartoonists created a cartoon city. And the way I became aware of it, I found myself in a city which was made out of caricatures. And I thought, oh, this must be a lucid dream. That is just too surreal to be taken seriously, you know. And I was convinced that I was in a lucid dream until I saw two people laughing in the distance. And they were having kind of game pads, and they were directing the characters. They were drawings in 3D. They were directing them through the city, and basically to them they had created like a kind of computer game. And then I started talking to them, and they explained the whole situation to me, that they have always loved comic strips and cartoons, and to them their ambition was to make it a reality. And so this incredible power we have on the astral plane allows us to create the most amazing scenarios, and I'm going to write a bit about that. I've been to parks which was Disneyland on steroids, you know, where people create the most outrageous things just for the pure entertainment of the inhabitants. And these happen mainly on the medium to higher astral levels, where people have access to much greater energy and more creativity. And so we find as we progress, the world becomes incredibly more beautiful, more abundant, more complex, more fantastic, you know. And that's one of the things I think many of us may want to look forward to, you know, who may be apprehensive about life after death. You know, it's basically a door opener. We are down here. We are limited by our conditioning and the laws of physics.